Dr. Petros Vamvakas, one of the most popular Greek professors in the Boston area, who's interviewed every Tuesday morning on Christian Echoes. Dr. Petros Vamvakas is the director of the Internet Training Institute at Emanuel College, and he takes a group of children every morning. Welcome.
Μεγάλη μου χαρά και τιμή να είμαι εδώ μαζί σας σε αυτή την εορταστική ημέρα. I hope this is not a lecture, but this is more of a discussion. Δίνετε ευκαιρία να μιλήσω μαζί σας, όχι να παρουσιάσω μια διάλεξη που κάνω στο Πανεπιστήμιο. Θα τα αρχίσω στα αγγλικά και θα τα πω και στα ελληνικά. Να υπάρχει και ισορροπία. So I'm going to start in English and then continue on in Greek, because this is one of those celebrations that some of us who grew up in Greece, as I did, we sort of like hear the same things and we know the story very well, but a lot of times we don't put the story in the reference of where we are and the realization of today. This is a presentation that has its roots even before the 200th anniversary of the Greek War of Independence, the celebration a couple of years ago. It could have had a different title. The title that I chose for today's presentation is 1821, the Greek Revolution, Religious Freedom and Justice. But it could have been a title that says the Greek Revolution and the American Redemption. It could also be a title that has to do with our own identity as Greeks. And Romulos Grekos, which is something that I'm going to talk about today as well. The Greek Revolution is an event which is sort of like a bigger even than the American Revolution or the French Revolution, or even another revolution that takes place around that time in 1804, the Haitian Revolution. The Greek Revolution is a revolution that has to do with values and interests. You go to the next slide. And what I mean by that is that, you know, the Greek Revolution is inspirational for a lot of people, not only the Greeks who were enslaved for 400 years, but it becomes inspirational for across the globe. And it's also a revolution that presents a lot of interest for the geopolitical of that land that's Greece itself. You know, Greece sits in a very important part of the world. So both values and interests really collide in this part of the world. And we see it like in my presentation, I will take you through 8 different stages. And I will start with a story that takes place right here in Boston. Most of us don't realize that a lot of the Greek Revolution really inspired a lot of people here in Boston, and it has to do with a lot of Boston history. Immediately after the American Revolution, there was a big beginning in this country as far as religious freedom was concerned. The people that came here in the 1600s were all Calvinists, they were very austere Protestants. But in the 1780s all the way to the 1820s, there was a sort of like a lot of religious uproar here. It's called the Protestant Awakening. I don't know how many people know about this. But the Protestant Awakening had to do with the ability of individuals to rise up to God, your hard work, your ability to really put yourself through your work forward, really was inspiration. And that really ties into the Greek story, as Greek was viewed as a place of redemption. And we can see those religious debates. Tulatos argues that in Greece, a lot of the Protestant missionaries who went to Greece for the very first time saw in Greece the redemption of the Greek, in the same way that the Greek was somebody that had been enslaved, and the alien was going to be brought forward. Not the Greek that was there, but the alien was going to be brought forward from antiquity. Αυτό που έλεγα είναι ότι η Ελληνική Επανάσταση δεν είναι μόνο συμβολισμός για τις αξίες, αλλά έχει να κάνει και με τα συμφέροντα τα οποία είναι στην περιοχή. Οι αξίες της περιοχής έχουν να κάνουν με την παλιγενεσία του έθνους, η παλιγενεσία του έθνους όσον αφορά τη θρησκευτική παλιγενεσία. Έχει να κάνει με το τι γινόταν εδώ στην Αμερική, εδώ στην Βοστόνη. Είχε μια μεγάλη διαμάχη, θρησκευτική διαμάχη μέσα από τους προτεστάτες εκείνο τον καιρό και η Ελλάδα ήταν ο τόπος στον οποίο αυτή η διαμάχη θα εξελισσόταν. Αυτή η διαμάχη που βλέπουμε έχει να κάνει με τις αξίες που έλεγα προηγουμένως. Οι αξίες οι οποίες είχαν να κάνουν με το πνεύμα των Ελλήνων της αρχαιότητας, το πνεύμα του Εσχύλου, τους Πέρσες. Είναι το ποίημα του Σέλη, το οποίο το γράφει για το Μαυροβορδάτο, το ποίημα λέγεται «Η Ελλάς». This is a poem that was written by Shelley for Alexandros Mavrocordatos. Alexandros Mavrocordatos is someone who don't know, somebody who was a foreign minister of Wallachia. He was a high-ranking official. And Shelley writes this poem, which he takes from Aeschylus' Persians. Aeschylus writes this play at the end of the Persian Wars, when the Persians leave and the Athenians and the Spartans defeat the Persians for the last time. So this was a redemption of sorts that Shelley writes. And of course, it's Harry Wordsworth Longfellow, when he writes a poem about his three friends who died, who are buried at Mount Auburn Cemetery here. Three friends, some of them, one of them Agassiz, the other one Felton, all of them Harvard presidents. And he writes this poem about the Attic sky and how sort of like this Greek idea of yesteryear was inspirational for a lot of people here in Boston, here as far as the American Revolution was concerned. So that was the value aspect of it. The other side of it is the interest side. We have here in Boston the USS Constitution. I don't know how many people have been to the USS Constitution. Anybody? USS Constitution. In the USS Constitution, Canaris and Kolokotronis were on there. And Canaris and Kolokotronis were on the USS Constitution in June of 1827. Now, for some of you who know a little bit about the Greek history, the story itself, the Battle of Navarino is in October of 1827. The Battle of Navarino is the last major battle against Greece autonomy. It's a battle in which the French, the Russian, and the English Navy defeat the Ottoman Navy in Navarino, a little bit south of Pylos. Some of you who are from Peloponnese know exactly where it is. It's across the way from Akaliani, across the way from Kalamat. This is October of 1827. In June of 1827, both Canaris and Kolokotronis get on the USS Constitution, which is the USS Constitution doesn't participate in the War of Independence of Greece on purpose. And it's tied to the Monroe Doctrine. Some of you who know American history, the Monroe Doctrine that was signed in 1823, 4 years earlier, had to do with Greece. There were plenty of prominent American statesmen that wanted to support Greece, two in particular, Edward Everett and Daniel Webster, both from Massachusetts, both representing Massachusetts, both wanted the USS Constitution to go to Greece and help the Greeks gain their independence from the Ottomans. The people who didn't want the Greeks to do that was a gentleman by the name of Thomas Henside Perkins. You probably have heard of him. Maybe you don't know him directly, but Henside Perkins is the guy who creates the Perkins School of the Blind. He owns the land that the Museum of Fine Arts is built on. He owns the land that the Mass General Hospital is built on. So Perkins is a very prominent Bostonian who transports opium from Smyrna to China. And he wants his interests to be protected. So the USS Constitution is sent to Greece, not to help the Greeks out, but to make sure that the Greeks, like Canaris, don't blow up any American ships. Canaris has blown up the Armada in Sarai in 1822, and the US sends the USS Constitution over to make sure that neutrality is maintained. That's the Monroe Doctrine of 1823. So the fact that Canaris and Colopatronis are on the ship in 1827, that means that everybody's now on board that the Greeks will get eventually their independence. Another interesting story for someone who are history buffs, Karaiskakis dies in May of 1827. The USS Constitution is there. The sailors of the USS Constitution in here, the fight in Athens, and absolutely nothing as Canaris falls in Athens in May of 1827. So this idea of the Greek Revolution has both the values of antiquity and the interests of today. Next slide. It's not only an interest of like religious versus geopolitical. This is a statement by David Walker. David Walker was a free African American who in 1829 writes this statement of a preamble to the colored people in the world. And he says, you know, how do we fight? How do we argue about slavery with the Greeks and we don't fight about our own slavery? The Greek War of Independence, because it was an issue of the enslaved against the civilized free, became inspirational even in the abolitionist movement. And this is what I mean by the redemption, the American redemption. There are two sins in the American story. One of them is slavery itself. And it's the Greek Revolution that really inspires the whole idea of the abolitionist movement in more than one way. And this is the proclamation of David Walker Proclamation. He dies at the age of 29. He said brilliant man. This is something that everybody can get access to. Next slide. This is in Roxbury. This is the home of William Lloyd Garrison. And William Lloyd Garrison is considered a radical abolitionist. William Lloyd Garrison with Samuel Gridley Howe, right here in Massachusetts, both of them still Hellenics. The whole idea of loving Hellas, loving the ideas of Hellas, and how inspiration Hellas is not only for the Greeks, but for across the globe. This idea of liberty, the idea of religious freedom, really stems from those values. Of course, for some of you, again, for American history, William Lloyd Garrison publishes the newspaper The Liberator. In the newspaper The Liberator, Frederick Douglass is somebody who works with him, is somebody that gets inspired by him. He is the Liberator. So this whole idea of redemption again from ancient Greece to modern Greece to modern United States is something that is very, very powerful. Which brings me to the next slide. This is a statue of a Greek slave. This is a statue that was brought to the United States in 1842. It was paraded in 27 different American cities. And it's a statue that was done in Florence by an American artist, Hiram Powers. It depicts a naked girl, which is sort of like provocative for its time. And this is the early 19th century. But if you see on her right wrist, she has a cross, and her hair is the style that Greek women would wear their hair. Supposedly, the inspiration for the statue was the poor girl that was sold after the massacre of Sarah. She was sold here, and the family here in Boston bought her, and actually they raised her as a role daughter. She dies of a pandemic in the early 1830s. She's buried over at Mount Auburn Cemetery today without any marking on her grave. So she becomes inspirational for this Greek slave, this statue, which really, the slave is not somebody who's African American. The slave is somebody who is white. The slave is somebody who is Christian. It really becomes inspirational and becomes sort of like the basis, as I will illustrate, for this type of art throughout the 19th century, as far as as far as what the revolution really means. This is a statue of by Harriet Hosmer. Harriet Hosmer was born in Watertown, Massachusetts. She dies in Watertown, Massachusetts. This is a statue of Zenobia. She was a queen of Palmyra. Palmyra is in today's Syria. But this is sort of, again, to illustrate not only the abolitionist movement now, but something else, the suffrage movement, the rights of women. Women in the Greek Revolution were not just subjects. Women in the Greek Revolution were actually fighters in the revolution. So this becomes inspirational for the women who are actually arguing for gender rights and freedom of political choice. And we see the drafting now. This is a statue on the left by John Bell. He's British, and he's inspired by the Greek slave, and he creates the daughter of Eve, which is a black young lady, and she has the same exact stance. And again, sort of like grafting the idea that the Greek Revolution was not just taking place in Greece, but becomes inspirational for the globe. Η ιδέα της ελληνικής επανάστασης δεν είναι μια ιδέα η οποία είναι τοπική μόνο στον ελλαδικό χώρο ή έχει να κάνει μόνο με την Ελλάδα. Η ιδέα της ελληνικής επανάστασης και της παλιγενεσίας έχει να κάνει με πολλαπλά μηνύματα τα οποία στην αρχή του 10ου αιώνα βρίσκουν αντίτυπο και στα θέματα της δουλείας αλλά και στα θέματα της ελευθερίας των γυναικών. Και το βλέπουμε αυτό διάσπαρτο και στις τέχνες, αλλά το βλέπουμε και αξιακά, το οποίο μεταφέρεται ύστερα και στους δύο αυτούς παράγοντες. Είναι τα δύο θέματα τα οποία ταλανίζουν την Αμερική τα πρώτα 100 χρόνια της ύπαρξής της και ταλανίζουν ακόμα. Δηλαδή τα θέματα της ταυτότητας που συζητάμε σήμερα, μπορούμε να δούμε τη βάση τους στην αρχή του 19ου αιώνα και μπορούμε να δούμε τη βάση τους ακριβώς στα θέματα που αναπτύχθηκαν και μέσα από την Ελληνική Επανάσταση. Άρα η Ελληνική Επανάσταση δεν ήταν ένα θέμα τοπικό, ήταν ένα θέμα παγκόσμιο, μια παγκόσμια ευέλεια. So we see this throughout. We see it, we see it in, this female nude body. It shows that the nakedness of slavery, the nakedness of somebody not being free altogether. And this is from an exhibition in London in the 1860s. So you can see how that now wraps all over to a bigger audience. So my next phase is this, which I mentioned earlier, is this idea of women, gender, the whole notion of the debate about the suffrage movement, which begins in 1821 when we show later Emma Willard Hart, who comes from Troy, New York, and she establishes the first female settlement based on the notions that really come out of the Hellenic ideas, and that's why she takes the name of Troy, New York. But one prominent feminist of the 19th century is Lucy Stone. Lucy Stone is somebody who worked with John Lloyd Garrison, and she's sort of like she's the first woman that receives a degree here in Massachusetts. She really is inspired by the Greek slave idea, and it was by her own proclamation, an emotional sort of like a drive to gain personhood. So from the windows, from the visions that all these people see, the museums, the statues, it becomes sort of like this notion now that we need to move forward, and liberty and liberation is not only an issue of the Greeks, as I mentioned earlier, but it's something that has a global meaning for women across the globe. Emma Hart Willard, as I mentioned earlier, 1821, she becomes very, very active. She sends a lot of food and material to the fighting Greeks, but she also establishes in Troy, New York, this female seminary, which becomes also something very different than what we had seen in the past. Lucy Stone, mentioned before, the first woman that gets a degree, a higher ed degree from Woburn University in 1847, very much inspired by the Greek Revolution. And the overall debate, this is Julia Ward. Julia Ward is the wife of Samuel Grimsby Howe. Julia Ward is the one that writes the Battle Hymn of the Republic, part of American history, immediately part of the American Civil War, the Battle Hymn of the Republic. Very inspired by the Greek Revolution. And you can see that this revolution was not without any debates. I mean, there's a real debates here, and this is one of those debates. Here's Julia Ward arguing for women and arguing for people of color getting the right to vote, but not necessarily of equity, not necessarily of equality. So these debates were very lively. They were not tilted one way. And last but not least, I would say that, as part of this presentation, a lot of times we sort of like celebrate the day for just the event of today and commemorating what happened in 1825. And there's a lot of debate as Petros and Emanuel really raised it on the 25th of March. That happened in the way that it did. This historical record is clear. And the inspiration that came out of the historical record is also clear that regardless of the exact time of the revolution, this was a resurrection, and whether it was a resurrection in the way that in the Protestant mindset, or whether it was a resurrection in the Orthodox mindset, that resurrection and that rebirth of a nation really inspired people not only in Greece, but inspired people across the globe. And this is, I think, to me, a very telling picture. This is the bedroom or the living room of Frederick Douglass after he passed away. You can see in the back, right next to the piano, the Greek slave. There's no one more telling about American liberation of the slaves than Frederick Douglass. And he's inspired more by the statue of the Greek slave than anything else. Thank you very much for giving me the
Any questions or comments?
Professor Tom, I realize history is the guy composer who's telling the story. The reason I'm saying this is my son's in 10th grade, and he's doing world history this year. And he told me in his book, it was like half a page or less regarding the Greek Revolution, in which there was mention that the Ottomans allowed the Greeks to exercise their religion. And also there was verbiage in there regarding that there was some sort of treaty between the European powers of the time and the Ottomans regarding they all agreed to crush any kind of revolutions in any of their respective countries. And the book was, according to my son, was basically saying the Europeans didn't carry out their end of the bargain. So anyway, I'm just telling you what my son's telling. I wanted to bring a perspective in such.
So, I think that's very important. What you say, it's absolutely true. And, when I was asked to do this presentation, I wanted to be more of a conversation than anything else, because like I said earlier, a lot of times we, go down the path and we say the same story again and again. It becomes our story. So I can talk about Alon Patron Germanos, I can talk about Karaiskakis, I can talk about Bupulina, and we can talk about, those are important things. I think it's very, very important that we place our story in a bigger story. And I think it's very, very important to understand that there were political motivations throughout the story. I think it's also it's important for us to understand that we are, and I'm not saying this in a very uber patriotic way, I'm not that person, but we are a people that carries with us three identities. Grecos, Elim, Romios, Grecos. I think if we understand those three identities, we'll understand a lot of things. Because Elim is somebody that's in antiquity, right? And a lot of the people that left here, Lord Byron, Shelley, who were really rich college boys, to tell you the truth, and had nothing else to do, they went to Greece to find Pericles. But they found Karaiskakis, who dropped his pants and was very obscene. They find Kolokotronis, who has taken a helmet that he likes and he puts it on and he pretends he's a general. They find Botsaris, who sort of like, sleeps with everybody's wife. They find people that are not what they imagine to be. And they spend the next 100 years trying to find Pericles. We are a mixture. We are a Romi as much as we are Hellenics. And they want to make us Greki, which is a slave. The term Grekos means a Roman slave. A Roman slave. So the identity of who we are really runs through our history. And a big part of our history, the Romios part, is something that's completely missing because nobody wants to accept that. Because if we say that we are Romi, then who are the other people on the other side? So they call us Byzantine, not Romi. We're Byzantine, which means backward, bureaucratic. Right? We are Romi as much as we are Elim, and we don't want to be Greki. I think that's the idea. And yeah, history, you take the small little part, it's partly true, but it's not the whole picture. The whole idea of the Europeans having all kinds of manipulations and having all kinds of, this is what the Europeans are doing right now. I'm sure somebody writing the story of Ukraine 100 years from now will say, this was agreed, that wasn't agreed, and you make a deal at the end of it. But there are people's lives on the line. And that's why I mentioned there's an issue of values, various interests. The value was to help the Greeks. If you read Daniel Webster says, I want to send the USS Constitution there to help the Greeks. Well, if you next time you're in Boston and you look at the Bunker Hill Monument, the Bunker Hill Monument, that's granite, that piece of granite was given by Thomas Perkins for free in order for John Quincy Adams to convince President Monroe to sign the Monroe Doctrine, which promised neutrality. That's the price that was paid. And when the captain of the USS Constitution goes to Elefsina and he finds hungry Greeks, he can't give them food because the USS Constitution has promised to be neutral. So you know what they do? They give them statuettes that they find in Elefsina, those statues for food. So the USS Constitution Captain Jones takes statues for food. We're upset about the Elgin marbles. How despicable is that? To change statues for food so you can be neutral. So politics, history is really like something that that's there. It's just a matter of how we sort of peel back the layers. But I think those are all questions that are very, very important. I think this is the time that we sort of grab our children with the real story to make it real for them. And when they go to the USS Constitution and to know that Kolokotronis at 53 years of age stepped on them, or Yeros Moria, he was 53 years old. I'm 59, I don't feel like an old man. Right? Or Canaris was on there. And they were on there because now the Americans knew that the war was imminently over. They did absolutely nothing to save Karaiskakis. Absolutely nothing, a month earlier. So that's Boston history, that's American history, that's Greek history. So for your son, I think, we peel back and then we can begin to question some of these things, and maybe occasions like this, we can discuss some of this stuff and get a better picture of it.
Any other questions, comments?
We always, I don't know if I need the mic, but whenever you come here, President Vamvakas, you learn something new. How many of us knew that the Constitution was adopted in Greece? Like, no, that's something we just don't know. We do get the big picture about the glories of the past and the democracy and how the United States and Greece are always been allies since the 1820s. But here's something that I think is a wonderful story. And it really, you've really done a great job of connecting such an important part of American history with between the art, between the freedom. It's so important, and we see it. How do we get other people to see it? I guess that's really important.
Well, we know, I agree with you. I mean, I don't know if I'm being heard, but I agree with you. And I think part of my team, I had a group of students, and we've mapped out all the Philhellenes in Mount Auburn Cemetery, for instance. So the idea would be is to take students and take them through Mount Auburn Cemetery and identify people that went and fought in Greece or were inspired by Greece. I mean, there's a person buried there, Evangelinos, who came from Philio. He went to Sina and then he became a professor at Harvard. He wrote the first dictionary of modern Greek and English dictionary. He calls it the Dictionary of Bavarian Greece. Because it's written all the way up to 1848, and we had a Bavarian king. Evangelinos is buried right at Mount Auburn Cemetery. Hosmer is buried right over Mount Auburn Cemetery. Felton, Agassiz, Sumner, Everett, all of them really grafted into this idea of Greece. I mean, Edward Everett spoke for 2 hours at the Gettysburg Address. We know the Gettysburg Address from the 240 words that Lincoln delivered. But Edward Everett is a preeminent scholar of classical Greece. And in some ways, they understood the values. And in some way, they also saw the interests, which are very, very prominent today. Sumner, who is a prominent senator, in 1866, Senator Sumner argues that Crete should be a naval station for American ships for the coal that's in the region. It's not by accident that today Crete and Suda Bay is a key to the Eastern Mediterranean. So some of these things have been viewed over time. We just see the microcosm of it, right? So I can tell you about Nikitaras. I can tell you about Bocharis. I can tell you about the stories. And I think those are important, but it's also important for us to peel back and see some of these things, because then we will understand our place in all of this and how, how we delve into this. Yes.
Could you clarify a little bit or elaborate on the 3 different aspects of modern or recently modern Greeks from, let's say, the 1600s today? You mentioned Hellenism, a term about Greco being a Roman slave in effect, and then the third I didn't catch.
Yeah, so Romios is the third one. And if you see it, it doesn't translate in English. It doesn't translate because the term Roman is only for the western part of the empire. If you went back and look at the 1,000-year Byzantine Empire, there's no such thing as the Byzantine Empire. There's no such thing, right? It was the Eastern Roman Empire. In 330 AD, the Emperor Constantine moves the capital to Constantinople. And he says there are 2 Romes, Eastern Rome and Western Rome. Western Rome falls, and it falls to all the barbarians that come from the north, right? Eastern Roman Empire exists all the way to 1453. Until May 29, 1453, the Eastern Roman Empire exists. They speak Greek, they are Roman, and they are Christians. Okay, those 3 identities are together, and they're together after 1204 and the 4th Crusade. So we, in the Ottoman system, we were Romni, we were Rum, Romni. We were Christian, we were Christian and Greek speakers. That included everybody. So even Slavs, some of the Slavs would be Romani because they were speaking Greek and they had Christianity, Orthodox Christianity. We were in the same, as the Ottomans called it, millet. Millet. Some of you who might be a little older remember your grandparents. The grandparents used to talk about miletia. The Ottomans divided everybody according to their religion. Religion is our primary identity as a Rome. We're Christian Orthodox. Language, second. Hellene refers to antiquity. Hellene refers to all the way up to the Roman takeover of Greece, and Silas, who destroys Greece in the 1st century. After Alexander, the Romans come and they destroy everything. They adopt that. That's what Hellene ends. For the Romans, we are Greki. We are Greeks. We are in this part of their territory to distinguish us from them. They are high civilization. We are low civilization, even though they took everything. So even in modernity, we identify ourselves as Greeks, not Hellenes. In those guys, Byron and Shelley and all that, they're looking for Hellenes. That's why they have the Ionic columns, the Doric columns, all that stuff that goes back to antiquity. It has nothing to do with 1,000-year history of the Eastern Roman Empire. That's completely wiped out, right? Which is our religion, which is our language. So a lot of times when we create a new state, we say, what? Katarevusa. I'm not going to speak the language of everyday people, the motiki. I'm going to speak the clean language. And some of you who came from Greece and have a certain age, you know exactly what I mean, that in order for you to be anywhere, you needed to show your ability to speak Katarevusa. Otherwise, you became either a laborer or an immigrant. There was no other place for you in that space of Greece. Okay, so those three identities are very much intertwined. Because, if you let one go, then others go. So
Isn't it true that the Greeks of the Ottoman Empire thought of themselves as Roman?
Rome, yeah.
That's what they call themselves.
Even the Turks. The Turks today, they call us Yunan. Yunan, meaning Ionians. They call us Ionians. They give us the idea that we own that space that's Asia Minor. That's why Ionia is. Ionia is a place from Constantinople all the way down to Cyprus. That's the Ionian, that's Ionian. They call us Yunan. We don't call ourselves Yunan. We call ourselves Greek, right? We have adopted the Roman term, not necessarily the Turkish term, which is a higher term for us because it's Yunan. It goes back thousands of years. Ευχαριστώ πάρα πολύ.